the Chicago Bears. I think besides Ted McMillan at 8, which we had seen mocked a good bit, I think we got, sucked into believing the Panthers were going to take an edge. But a lot of people still mocked McMillan there. I think the 10th pick was really where things started to kind of go in a different direction with the draft, with the Bears taking Colston Loveland. So what were your thoughts with that pick specifically, and then kind of where the Bears went from there?
I'll start by saying I think Colston Loveland's a good player. However, we were watching the draft together, Dakota, and you know my reaction to that pick. I was absolutely shocked. I was floored. For one, I didn't expect them to take a tight end. I didn't really feel like that was a strong enough need where they would take it with the 10th pick. Maybe they just thought he was the best player available, but even that's surprising because the majority of draft analysts felt like Tyler Warren was the best tight end in this class, and they went with Colston Loveland. Interesting pick. Top 10 tight ends have not had a good track record as of recent. Like last season, Brock Bowers went 13. Again, you can't compare draft classes, but just on the surface, that kind of feels rough. But listen, if Loveland becomes an elite tight end, then that's worth the 10th overall pick, no question about it. I just mostly think about what they could have had instead of Colston Loveland. So that wasn't my favorite pick of theirs, but it did get better for the Bears throughout the rest of their draft, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, nothing to say that Loveland's not a good player. Just they started to get a lot of steam, I think, a few weeks before the draft that they may go tight end there, and it's probably due to the noise that some of the media who's more in tune with these franchises kind of knew. But I do agree. It was, it's obvious based on this draft that they had, a bit of a plan with their first few picks to just build around Caleb Williams. So they're adding a dynamic playmaker to tight end. He has a different skill set than Cole Kmet. He was at 96th percentile in yards per route run, which is pretty good for a tight end. So maybe we also let the noise get to us a little bit in terms of the rankings of the tight ends. We never know, but it did seem like Tyler Warren was the consensus, at least on the consensus board, was the better prospect. So, but they had a plan. I mean, apparently they loved him. So, I mean, it gives Caleb Williams a dynamic playmaker over the middle of the field specifically, which can pair with their second round pick, which was one of our favorite picks from the entire draft, which was Luther Burden. He falls to the second round, and the Bears grabbed him at pick 39, adding another playmaker to that offense. So I think when you pair that pick with Loveland, you start to see the vision a bit, and you're like, okay, this offense is about to be pretty dynamic.
I totally agree with that, man. I mean, listen, Luther Burden in the second round, that automatically made me love their draft because I definitely thought he was worth a first round pick. I mean, you could argue coming off his 2023 season that he's worth a top 10 pick. So it's kind of, again, one of those drafts where it's like, well, if you flip the two players, maybe I don't hate it as much, even though I don't think I would have taken Luther Burden this draft with a top 10 pick either. But listen, Luther Burden has a ton of potential, and plugging him in that offense, it was a pretty clear theme that the Bears said, hey, it's Caleb Williams time. Like, we're going to load him up with weapons. We are going to provide what we need to provide. Because if you pair that, their first two picks, with what they did with the offensive line in the offseason, it's like they are focused on their franchise quarterback, which I love as a strategy. I may not have loved the Colston Loveland pick, but I love the overall strategy of saying, hey, you know what? We are going to put Caleb in the best position as possible. And that's what they did with their first two picks, man. And I love the Burden pick because it's like you got a second first rounder with one of your second rounders. So, yeah, I absolutely love that pick.
Yeah, completely agree. And he adds something to the offense that, I know some fans, Bears or not, may be like, well, you just drafted Rome Odunze last year. Why do you need him? But he's a very different player than Rome. He fits pretty well. He may be slightly more like DJ Moore. But DJ and Rome are better outside guys, and Luther's a guy you kind of want to put in the slot and or just kind of have him move around constantly, Somebody you can throw screens to. You want him running shallow routes. You just want to get the ball in his hands early and then let him go make plays because he's pretty elite when it comes to being able to break tackles as a receiver. So again, adding something that also can be, both these picks are almost like security blanket-esque, right, for Caleb, where you've got the tight end that can be over the middle of the field, and then you've got Luther who can, take short routes and take them the whole way. So love both those picks from at least building around Caleb. And after revamping the offensive line like they did, their offense is starting to look pretty damn good. So And then continuing to add depth with their second, they traded back. So they had those 2 second-round picks at the top from the Bryce Young trade. And they ended up trading back where the Bills came up for TJ Sanders. So they trade back, pick up some extra draft capital, and then take Ozzie Trapillo, the tackle from Boston College. I think he played right tackle the past couple seasons. So I'm guessing the plan will probably be to move him back to the left, which he started at Boston College, to probably compete for that left tackle job with Braxton Jones, because I think they're pretty solid with Darnell right now at right tackle. Either way, it adds depth, but I would assume he'd probably come in and start competing at that left tackle spot.
Yeah, and even if if the plan for him isn't to start right away, you need a swing tackle, and he's a good option for a swing tackle or a developmental tackle. I mean, listen, tackles outside the first round are, usually developmental guys. They're not usually slated to start. But I mean, I'm never gonna fault a team for taking a chance on a tackle because it's such a valuable position. Now their next pick, Shamar Turner, I didn't love that pick as much. Shamar Turner is not a very productive player. And I felt like they could have had better in that position. But listen, they do need defensive line depth. There's no question about that. I just felt like there's probably better players on the board than Shamar Turner at that position if they were trying to attack a specific position. But honestly, I don't even know. Looking at the Bears draft, I don't know if that is their strategy. I think they probably had guys they just really liked, and they were like, it doesn't really matter what position they're at. We're just going to take this guy, and that's kind of what this pick felt like. But again, I mean, I don't love Shamar Turner as a player, but I get it. I understand that kind of pick. So,
yeah, I completely agree. And everybody wanted to, kind of give them edge early on in the mocks at 10. If it wasn't Genty. So it's kind of interesting to see them not go that route at all in the draft, but they did at least add, one piece to add some depth to that defensive line. But they used that with that other second-round pick, so that trade back gave them another second. So they ended up with 3 second-round picks, which is love seeing that drafting in volume in the early rounds like that. And then they take probably one of the bigger reaches in the draft with Ruben Hippolyte, the second pick out of Maryland. But he's an interesting prospect because it's obviously loved him, but the dude is quick. Sideline to sideline type guy, not incredibly productive. At Maryland, a bit undersized, but the guy's fast. He can kind of go from sideline to sideline for them. So adding some depth at linebacker, and they picked up Zal Frazier from UTSA, the corner, to add some depth there as well, and then round it out with the Luke Newman pick, which I think a few people were pretty high on him. The transfer from Holy Cross to Michigan State. So adding some guard depth at a guy that, they need depth on that offensive line. They revamped it, and now they've added depth pieces to it. So, I mean, it's obvious that with Ben Johnson, they want to future-proof that.
It is interesting. I mean, Luke Newman is slated to be their backup left guard right now. So, I mean, in the 6th round to get a depth piece like that, I like that pick a lot. I thought they probably could have tacked running back a little sooner. There was a lot of good running backs left on the board at their 4th pick when they kind of reached on Ruben, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they felt like, I mean, that was kind of the chatter. I mean, people kind of thought like they were the Genty landing spot. I think if Genty fell to them, they probably would have went Genty, to be completely honest with you. But all their 2nd round picks, I thought they might take a running back with all their seconds. They just didn't. They felt like they didn't need to do that. So, which is fine. I get it. I mean, take the more valuable positions, which is kind of what they did. I mean, they did take the more valuable positions until the 4th round, but yeah, also to touch on your point earlier, dude, they did a great job of working the board, man. I mean, they loaded up on next year draft capital, and that's what good teams do, man. They draft in volume, they just get more shots, and it usually works out. So yeah, overall, I do like this Bears class, especially that Luther Burden pick.
Yeah, completely agree. And Kyle Monangai is an interesting guy. He's a short, stocky power guy who has a little bit of a burst. He had a solid 10-yard split on his 40. Ran a pretty slow 40, but he's got a little bit of twitch to him at his size. So I think, to be honest, there's a solid chance he's already getting some of those tougher carries alongside Roschon Johnson when Swift's not out there. So completely agree though. Surprised they didn't go running back a bit earlier, and maybe they had, depending on how the board went, and they just didn't want to force it. So, and I think somebody pointed out that one of the first things that happened when Ben Johnson showed up to Detroit was stop using DeAndre Swift, and then they shipped him out. So we'll be curious to see what he does. It doesn't seem like he's a big fan of him. So we'll see what he does with him. But Monangai could get some touches early. And to your point, they made all those moves in this draft class, and then they leave with 8 picks in next year's draft. So make 3 second-round picks and still have extra draft capital next year. Can't really beat that.
Yeah, I agree, dude. Again, that's what the better teams do. They draft in volume. So we saw that with the Ravens draft that we've already reviewed, and they've already set up next year to draft in volume once again. So, yeah.
Okay, last thing then. Who was your favorite pick from the Bears?
I have to say Luther Burden, man. I just felt like Luther Burden was such good value there. I think he's going to make an impact on this offense right away. Like you said, his skill set fits into that offense immediately. You play Moore and Odunze on the outside, and you throw Luther Burden in the slot and let him do what he does. And that Bears, if Caleb Williams is good, the Bears are going to be fantastic, man. It really just comes down to Caleb's development and if he can take a jump in year 2.
Yeah, I completely agree. We were both big, really high on Luther Burden. Wide receiver 2 for both of us. Would have gladly had a team take him, from pick probably 18 on in the first, and would have felt pretty good about it. So to pick a different one, I do like the Luke Newman pick. I think taking a shot on a guy like that from Holy Cross that, goes to the Big Ten and Michigan State, plays really well, adds depth, and could potentially be, a guy that you can plug in if anything happens to one of your 2 guards. So I'll shout out the Holy Cross transfer alum with that one. Cool. So that wraps up the Bears 2025 class.